Hi there, welcome to this session on Townscape, a visual approach to urban design, where we're going to delve into the psychology of urban design and get to understand why some places make us feel good, other places make us feel lethargic, dull. So let's get into the psychology of urban design. What are we going to do? We've got 4 key aims. First one, simply raise your awareness of the Townscape approach to placemaking, help you see places in a new light, and help you become familiar with the language of the Townscape approach. All this to help you discover a subtle but powerful new way of making places interesting at a basic structural level. Before we get into it, why is that important? It's important because it's easy to make really dull, crap development that makes a profit. It's also easy, with a bit more effort, to make places that are visually stimulating, interesting, and that draw people to them. Still make a profitable development, but one that's actually interesting. And if you're involved with it, perhaps you come away with an enhanced reputation for creating good stuff. Okay, how are we going to do it? We'll start by examining a definition of the concept and looking at the origins of the concept, primarily looking at the work of Gordon Cullen. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this part as it's not a history lesson. We'll spend more time looking at examples of Cullen's theories and methods, examine examples of application, and we'll look at where we get our information from and examine how we can use the approach in practice. So then, what is Townscape? What is this thing called Townscape? Let's have a look at the approach and the origins. It's an approach that emphasises visual perception of the built environment. Kind of what do you take in through your eye? And it makes a big assumption that visual perception and improvement can be done in a kind of an objective manner when we get to understand the emotional effects that the positioning of certain key physical elements actually has. So, how does a place make us feel? Safe, comfortable, threatened, interested, stimulated? And it's a method that seeks to create this thing called a sense of place. And it kind of believes that physical changes in an environment can change the way we feel about a place. Let's have a look at these 2 images. These are from Gordon Cullen's book, The Concise Townscape. And for me, what they show is how the simple placing of different elements can completely change the feel of a place. Let's start with the image on the left. So here we've got this image on the left. For me, it kind of says, like old world, local. We can see there's a fishmonger or a shop on the left-hand side. It seems to me as if it's a place. There's this foreground, there's things spilling out of the shop. There's an old-fashioned light. There's a light strung between the 2 buildings. We've got trees in that background. And it implies that this is a place, it's somewhere to stay. Right, let's get the other side. Highway engineers have been through, replaced the old-fashioned lamp with huge, I think out-of-scale engineering lamp columns. The vegetation at the back's gone. The light strung between the 2 buildings is gone. There's nothing spilling out onto the pavement anymore. That space to me looks now like a place you simply move through. It's not a location. It's just somewhere on the way to somewhere else. How has that feeling changed? Look at the changes that have been made physically, and we get an example here of how physical changes can actually give you a different emotional feel for a place. It's become 2 different places. The physical arrangement of places affects the image of the place. It affects how we feel about place. It gives out a kind of imageability, to use a phrase from Kevin Lynch, and it starts to give a place an identity, such as like this: the dream inspires, the dreaming, slightly kind of jagged, pointy townscape of Oxford when seen from a distance. It's also about trying to create visual interest, the irregular. This is Woodstock. There's not much that's regular in that image. There's not much that you could easily measure in 3 dimensions. Everything's a bit wiggly. It's kind of textured. So we've got slight variations in roof heights, slight variations in setbacks, slight variation in window detail, a combination of buildings, vegetation, space. Everything in there is adding to, if you like, the visual texture of the place, and yet the whole thing's held together somehow. There's a theme. So Townscape is something that's kind of predictable. All those buildings are more or less on the same building line. There's not a huge variety in roof height. There's not a huge variety in materials. The windows are more or less the same kind of ratio, although some are bigger than others. The vegetation is planted in a more or less a kind of line. There's something predictable about it, and yet at the same time there's a lot of unpredictable. A lot of things that are varied. That's what makes places interesting. That's what makes us feel safe. Variation within a theme. We get the same thing on this image. Variation, ins and outs, lots of fluctuation on the building line. There's a kind of wiggliness to it, this surprise, but it's predictable at the same time. We get that feeling that we're being pulled through. We can see there's something else at the top of that hill, just beyond the rise. And we get that kind of wiggliness, literally, the wiggliness of the yellow line. Again, we've got surprise and predictability. We've got interest, variation. It's not dull. It's a highly textured view. The main player in all this is a guy called Gordon Cullen. He wrote The Concise Townscape in 1961. And he was really interested in how as designers we can create excitement and drama, we can get an emotional response. And he identifies the physical and visual elements that allow us to understand spaces, and he comes up with this notion of place, and he comes up with another concept, there's a concept of serial vision. If you think about it, we never observe places simply by standing completely still in one place as if we're looking at a photograph. You move through a place, and that's the idea of serial vision. The place is revealed to you as you actually move through it, and you experience places as a dynamic thing. Gordon Cullen and other authors at the same time were reacting to things like suburban sprawl, the notion that everywhere's becoming the same. It's a bit kind of dull and boring, the scale's too big. So looking at this 1930s development in Oxford in comparison with that development in Woodstock. Perhaps one place is seen as being visually more interesting than the other. Although Cullen are also reacting to the visual qualities of modernist developments, where the local context, character, historic conservation of the place was ignored in favour of kind of new, machine-driven, not just ways of living, but ways of producing place. So we got Cullen and his colleagues in the late 50s and early 60s reacting against this kind of new wave of new placeless development. Let's look at a few of the underlying ideas then that underpin Gordon Cullen's approach to Townscape. We'll start with this image. This is Petergate in York, looking towards York Minster. Townscape is defined by Cullen as the art of giving visual coherence and organisation to the jumble of buildings, streets and spaces that make up the urban environment. Now look at that picture. It is a jumble of stuff, and yet at the same time there's an underlying structure. It's got some kind of coherence. We've got the street edges. In the mid-ground there's a building. You can see it's got a triangular space on the roof, and it's giving us this what's known as a deflected vista. It's suggesting there's something around the corner. We can almost see this as a theatre set. So we've got the foreground where there's kind of people are standing. We've got the mid-ground where we've got that deflected vista, and then we've got the background scenery of the Minster kind of rising above everything else and giving this a real kind of three-dimensional depth. We've also got the irregularity on the sides of the streets with the indentations of the buildings. There's different shop fronts. So these are all the elements that go to create a place, and Cullen is inviting us to try and weave them together in such a way that we get kind of drama and interest. So it's actually about the art of relationships between buildings and spaces and buildings themselves. Now, Cullen comes forward with two key ideas. So let's have a look at each in turn. Let's start with a sense of place first. So Cullen's approach was to study the qualities of those existing environments, analyse them, to try and derive some common themes that he felt could be replicated in contemporary design. He came up with this notion of sense of place. So let's look at this image, again drawn from Cullen's concise Townscape. How many spaces make up this place? Or is this a collection of places? So you have a look at it and decide how many spaces are there. So I'll pause for a second while you think about it. I guess some people would say there are three. There's this foreground space, there's this middle space, and there's this background space. We could look at it in a bit more detail and actually say, no, there are more than that. There's those three. Then there's this space behind the railings, there's the balcony space. We could go a bit further and start to think about spaces being defined by different materials. The crucial thing here is that the foreground space and the background space only exist because these two buildings create a contrast. They create this kind of pinch point. So to get from one space into another, you go through this third one, you go through that threshold. So is this a place that is held together as a series of spaces? If we look at buildings by themselves, a building standing alone in a piece of countryside, such as that image top right, we see it as a piece of architecture. But when we're thinking about creating whole places, we start to manipulate buildings so that they create spaces between them. They create that spatial network. Suppose that buildings have been put together in a group, so you can get inside the group, and the space between the buildings starts to take on a life of its own. And that becomes this notion of sense of place. Cullen's other really key concept is this notion of serial vision. The notion that we experience places as we move through. So now we're going to actually walk through some examples from Cullen's book, and we're going to follow those red arrows, and we'll take a route, and we'll experience serial vision. So let's start up here. Okay, we're standing outside the place. We're in a foreground space, and there's a pinch point, and also there's a contrast between the light of the foreground and the dark of that pinch point, the shadow of that little tunnel. But we see that there's something beyond it. Okay, we see this series of serial spaces. So let's follow the arrow. Now we're standing in that enclosure, and now we see something new. We don't see everything all at once. Things are revealed as we move through. Now we see there's a landmark, there's something beyond the landmark. We go into that space, we walk up to the landmark. As we walk up to the landmark, more details are actually revealed. We can't see the carving from a distance. See the landmark, and behind it, get a glimpse of another space. We walk through that space, there's another pinch point, and there's another landmark. This time it's a church, but it's in another space. And you can see how the shadow that Cullen's drawn on here emphasises that difference between one place and another. We walk towards the church, and next to it we see another part of the serial vision. There's a little tunnel, an archway. It's dark. It invites us through. There we are again. Now we're approaching the thing, and we can see light on the other side. It pulls us through. If anybody's ever been to Venice, this is exactly the kind of experience you get in Venice. When I first went there, I didn't come out of the hotel for half an hour. I was convinced I was going to get lost. It didn't take very long to realise that you actually navigate by spaces, and each space is connected by a series of almost alleyways, narrow streets. And after a while, you build up a mental map of spaces, and you don't really get the detail of the things that link them together. You memorise the spaces. And that's what's going on here in terms of serial vision. Here we go again. We go through another pinch point, and we're into another bigger space. We go through that space, and then we're into kind of infinity and beyond. I'm actually starting to use some of the terms that Gordon Cullen coins in his book. So it's infinity, openness, here, there, narrows, widens. So that's the notion of serial vision. So when we're creating a new piece of town, as we do as urban designers, or as we're building a new piece of town, as you do as developers, we need to actually think about how we create a place that's got a really great experience, because that is going to pull in customers, that's going to pull in clients. Let's look at some of Gordon Cullen's concepts of describing place. We'll look at some of the main ones, we won't do all of them. You will find on your Moodle site, those that you were doing this module through Oxford Brookes, a glossary of Cullen terms put together by one of our ex-MSc spatial planning students, Kirsten Gray, where she identifies and describes each of these concepts and more. So let's go back to that drawing we looked at earlier and put some more labels on. So these are Cullen's labels now: openness, enclosure, here, there. All right. The openness, in contrast to that enclosed space, creates that concept of standing here and there's something being over there, that notion of movement, dynamic and visual interest. Let's have a look at a few more concepts. We've looked at the here and there. You'll see this particularly if you look at the Bridge of Sighs in the centre of Oxford. That's a really good example of a here space, an enclosure, something beyond it. Other key things are the notion of creating drama and shock by contrast from enclosure to kind of space and infinity, or looking at captured spaces, such as here we see a balcony. It might easily be that space outside a cafe where people have placed tables. A couple of really useful ones are the notion of deflected and closed vistas. So here we see two different types of vista. At the top is a sketch of the cathedral in Liverpool. As a closed vista, you see nothing beyond. What you do see is this kind of dark hole that represents the inside of the space, which creates this notion of mystery. It's enhanced by the fact it's at the top of the stairs, but there's something going on, but you don't see beyond. You're invited in, as opposed to a deflected vista, where the building placed at an angle to the thoroughfare suggests movement. It kind of draws you, gives you an indication that there's actually something beyond. It's not closed, it's kind of open, it's moving you through the space. Another one that you'll see, if you walk down the High in Oxford, you'll see buildings projecting into space or recessing, the opposite, actually falling back, creating subspaces such as this kind of portico, within which you may get kind of cafe functions spilling out. You'll also see simple things, barriers, borders emphasised around spaces, giving us that subliminal indication of whether something is a private space or an open space. And here we've got Cullen identifying the kind of typical Georgian square in London developments, one with a railing, giving, it's not a very subtle hint, is it, that this is a private space, one open, giving an indication it's a communal space. Think about when you walk into a park or a garden, how different does it feel if you've got to make a decision to go through a gateway? There's a kind of control, psychological control going on, and you do behave differently when you walk across a threshold that's giving you a signal that there's a private space beyond. These are examples from Kirsten Gray's glossary of Townscape terms from her MSc dissertation. And here you can see on the left-hand column, she indicates the Cullen-esque term, so incident, punctuation, narrows. Here we get a description, a graphic description, photograph, and actually you use this as a way of being able to actually quantify townscape features in an environment. And you may want to do this when you're analysing a place or when you're actually trying to produce your own design development. How is this applied? How is it used? It's used quite often in design guides, and there's a place that some of you may be familiar with in Oxford where a townscape approach was used. So this is Gloucester Green in the centre of town. It's a multifunction space. It's a market space, it's an event space, it can be a spillover car park, it's a mixed use development with retail, office uses, a cinema, bus station, but also residential development above. And this is what it looks like. Again, a bit like when we looked at Woodstock, there's not an awful lot there that can be measured in terms of a kind of regular 1, 2 or 3 dimensions. There's a texture to the place, there's an irregularity, kind of wiggliness. And we can start to identify Cullen-esque concepts when we look at this image. So, in the foreground, we've got our here, you know, where we're standing, where we're viewing. We look through, there's the pinch point, there's the arch, the entrance through the bus station. The bus station becomes a their space. We've got openness in the foreground, we've got an enclosure, and then we've got openness again. The trees on the left hand side create what Cullen would describe as a screened vista. We can see projection and recession on the building line, so these columns supporting the projection of the building, and then the space around the front door, recesses, and we've also got what Cullen calls change of level. So it's giving emphasis to that doorway. We've got the recession of the building line to create balconies. We've got that captured space being indicated by the railings. And then we've got a kind of fluctuation of the building line as these curves can kind of come out, they drop back in again. We've got a fluctuation of the roof line. But the fluctuations are not great. So it's almost got a predictability. After the first couple of units, the patterns repeat. So it's kind of comfortable. It's variation, but it's variation within quite a tight theme. That's the essence of Townscape. Where do we find information that helps us actually create Townscape in our new designs? Well, Townscape information is all around us. We can go out, we can observe it, we can look at it, but we can also find data on things like the Ordnance Survey. You will be asked to go out and actually do a Townscape analysis of parts of Oxford. And I'm now going to show you one that was done 4 or 5 years ago by an ex-planning student, a guy called Bima Panama, who now works in Malaysia. So we've got about 10-minute video of a Townscape analysis of Oxford. And pay attention to it because it links Gordon Cullen's concepts that we've talked about briefly to observations of the place. And it's almost like putting on a new set of goggles or glasses and seeing Oxford in a slightly different way. So we'll let that play, and then we'll come back to and look at sources of information that help us start to deliver Townscape as a design project.
The city of dreaming spires, ingenuity, town and gown. Its colleges, architectural wonders, small alleys, busy shopping streets, the epicenter of academia. The aim of this video is to judge whether Oxford has a sense of place, referring to the concepts coined by Gordon Cullen in his book, Concise Townscape. The route starts from Market Street, then immediately turn left onto Tell Street, which leads to Broad Street, and then turn right towards Sheldonian Theatre, walk through the gate leading to Old Clarendon Building, followed by the Bodleian Library, and come out at the Radcliffe Square. Follow the narrow alley leading to the High Street, cross the High Street and immediately enter Magpie Lane. Then left to Merthyr Street and follow the road which goes towards the High Street. Turn right following the High Street and finish at the Model Tower. Market Street, Tell Street. Standing at the end of Market Street, one can see 3 different materials used for the floor, which also suggests there are 3 different spaces with 3 different uses. The facade of the building suggests one to anticipate another space to the right. Turning left, then one cannot help not to lay eyes on the grand building. The high level of detail and intricacy of the building dominate the sight, deserving attention from people walking past. Moving along Ter Street, one can feel the sense of here-ness and there-ness as the row of buildings on both sides end. On the left, one can see the contrast between private and public buildings by the mass of both facades, and contrast with its simplicity and intricacy. Broad Street. Here one can feel the openness of the space created by the scale of the buildings. There is a punctuation on the facade of the building, which leads us to the view of Old Clarendon Building and the row of buildings behind it, which creates the sense of closure. Here the fence gives a bold impression of a private space behind it, public space outside, and the importance of the buildings it protects. The Sheldonian Theatre, Bodleian Library, Radcliffe Camera, Radcliffe Square. The open gates invite us to explore further. The building at the far end is telling us there's a space there, there's something going on there. Once we step into the ground, our eyes will immediately catch the intricacy of the building. We then will be looking at an enclosure, and we will notice the mall, which gives us the sense of mystery and pulls us even further. Standing in the middle of the space defined by these magnificent buildings, we cannot help not to feel intimidated, as if we were told that you have entered the university ground where only the cleverest people from all around the world can enter, where education is at its finest, and where, behind these buildings, there are people who are being trained to be the best in societies. By intensifying the contrast of the surface, people are guided to another space here, to another space there, through a small arch in contrast with the enclosure we are experiencing here. The pedestrian way is not only a slit left between two walls planned to let people through, it is a series of contrasts, the difference between outside and inside arousing curiosity and anticipation. By standing here, we can feel the sense of here-ness and there-ness, divided by the arch, looking out from the enclosure. As we're walking out, the arch acts as a frame, capturing the deflected scene of the Radcliffe camera. This pulls people to come closer to admire the monument. Our eyes will catch the monument straight away without looking at the other buildings around it. Looking down, we can see the fence to define private with public spaces. Moving left, our eyes will lay at St Mary's the Virgin's Church Tower straight away. This tower acts as an incident of the other uniformed building which define Radcliffe Square. The church tower could also be seen from a distance together with other towers and spires, which give Oxford the name the City of Dreaming Spires. Cattle Street, High Street, Magpie Lane, Merton Street. The crowding together of buildings in Cattle Street forms a pressure and unavoidable nearness of detail, which is in direct contrast to the Radcliffe Square. If here is Radcliffe Square, so what's over there? The small alley gives us the sense of mystery. We can sense the glimpse of the unknown, the mystery of a city where anything could happen or exist. The sharp corners make us anticipate something to happen around the corner. At the end of Magpie Lane, a deflection of a church is revealed, inviting us to come closer and admire. This building is painted in a different bright colour, resulting in it to stand out amongst the others. The narrow alley creates the sense of the unknown beyond, infinite, mysterious and hidden. Back on the high street, The University College signals the end of the high street by interrupting the alignment of the shops. On the left, we can also see an occupied territory marked with furnitures and canopies from a coffee shop. Keep walking along, we can see a vista screened by trees. We can also see a glimpse of Magdalen Tower, which reveals itself as we walk closer. This acts as a surprise, which turns mystery and anticipation into excitement. I believe Oxford is a complete town for human beings, satisfying to those who live in it, work in it, or simply look at it. Buildings' compositions are seen as a piece of meaningful art which have been manipulated by an artist. Oxford has a sense of place. This assignment has taught me how to transform buildings from meaningless model into a meaningful composition. I believe when designing in the future, I will be referring to Gordon Cullen's concepts in order to achieve it.
So there you have it, Bimmer Panama's view of Oxford as a place, using the concepts of Gordon Cullen to try and make sense out of it. Not only an interesting illuminating analysis, but a really good example of how to actually use video to get that message across. Okay, that's about analysing place. What if we actually want to say, yeah, there's something about this place, I want to replicate it. This is not about simply replicating everything that you see, it's about replicating the feelings that you get as you move through a place and understanding the relationships between building and space to deliver that feeling. Now, where do we get that information from? It is all around us. You can observe it. In order to create something, you need to go and measure it as well, so you can replicate that measurement. And the Ordnance Survey, accessible by Digimap really easily, takes all the guesswork. Takes all the guesswork out, because we can start to scale off drawings. We can produce figure ground drawings like this. The areas in black represent structure, buildings, the white is a space. If you wanted to create that feel of space, enclosure, of difference from here and there, enclosure, openness, you can trace this off, you can measure it, you can replicate it, you can use it as a base map to create somewhere new. Which is exactly what one of our MA students did a few years ago when creating a new area of Oxford called Greyfriars. And he wanted to use the DNA of Oxford, wanted to use the DNA and character of the High to create something recognisable as being of Oxford, but not a total copy. So starts by doing an analysis of the High, taking a visual analysis in terms of certain buildings and realising that a whole of the High is actually on a curve, which means you get a series of deflected vistas. You look down the High, you'll see projection, recession, fluctuation of the building line, incidents, landmarks, screened vistas. It's a really good example of how all those townscape concepts can come together. This is an analysis of the High in Oxford, looking at the positions of incidents, of punctuation, of deflected vistas, of closed vistas, looking at visibility cones, the fluctuation of building lines, and major projections and recessions. So this is still getting to understand the place, with the intention of taking some of this information and starting to turn it into a design. And here is this design, this new street, Greyfriars in Oxford. It's the area that is now down by the new Westgate Centre. But if we look at the map, the plan, we'll see, using those same symbols, how the designer has tried to replicate certain features of the High, but without completely copying the High. It's not about copying all the historical detail, it's about taking out the relationships between buildings and space to create, as three-dimensional models, a place that's got the feel of the High, but is not an exact copy, and yet it would create that same level of interest and intrigue as you move through the place. So how do we use this? How do we use this notion of Cullen's concepts and deliver embedded large-scale structural interest and richness? Some of the things we do when we're starting to put together a design package is to just do some simple 3D modelling and drop our camera down into what would be a streetscape and use our Cullen-esque labels to actually describe what we're seeing. If you like, drop ourselves into that space. And using bits of foam board like this, or small wooden blocks, allows us to move things, modelling an increased townscape texture, or decreased townscape texture. And this image shows us that notion of, think of places as a stage set where you're designing the foreground, the midground and the background, and you've got that depth of scenery. So this is not unlike that photograph I showed you of Petergate in York, where the landmark there was the Minster, the cathedral sitting in the background. We can use three-dimensional renders, things produced in SketchUp or CityCAD, and then if you've got the skills, you render them in 3D Studio Max, and then you do the same thing again. You use Cullen's labels to describe what you're seeing. And if at first you can only put on 2 labels, then you must be designing a really bloody boring place. So let's go back and change it. Let's open up some spaces. Let's create some pinch points. Let's put in some deflected vistas. Let's actually create some projection and some recession. Let's create some captured spaces. The other thing we can do is to actually use all this to create not just a video of analysis, but a video that actually sells the townscape qualities of a place. That's what we're going to look at next. So we're going to move to a project which was undertaken for an area in Birmingham called the Icknield Port Loop. It's from 2014 by a student, TK Salea, where she's looking at a very large, high density development and is determined to actually use Cullen's concepts to make that interesting. I'll start the video and then I'll fast forward it. It's 15 minutes long. We need to start at minute 9, but you can watch the full thing in your own time, perhaps have a cup of coffee. So let's just zoom through there and start the video and then I'll move it on.
Gordon Cullen introduces the concept of serial visions and stated that variations to physical elements can change perceptions and feelings. Cullen also suggested that although the user may walk through a town at a uniform pace, the place should incorporate a series of events and related spaces to create a sense of journey and discovery in the urban environment. This run-through shows the changes of experience that can be seen along the new Icknield High Street from the Icknield Port Road. Some of the serial vision elements that can be found in this proposed master plan of Icknield Port Loop are: They create a series of captivating drama enhancing the user experience upon entering the development, delivering an enriched townscape approach. Arguably, serial vision can be implemented at the lower residential densities. However, a range of street typologies and enclosed spaces can only be included in the design of neighborhoods of a certain density, creating a successful sense of serial vision. Therefore, densities should not be too low in order to achieve this strategy of good townscape, for it will visually decrease factual dimensions and overlying vistas. The final strategy to a well-delivered townscape design is streetscape and sensory richness. Lynch suggested that the journey through the city should project to all human senses. recognition of nature and location of sources by taste and smell system will trigger memory of emotional response, which gives character to a townscape.
So a slightly abrupt end to the video, but I think you get the message in terms of trying to deliver a variety of experiences as you go through a place. So although as urban designers, planners, developers, if we're doing an urban design course, we'll be taught that connected streets is a really good way of delivering development. It's actually very easy to create something that would tick lots of urban design boxes, but actually visually would be extremely dull. Use the Townscape approach to actually make sure that your designs, or any design that you're involved with in future, creates a variety of experiences and is not seen as a dull development. Let's just summarise what we've looked at. Everything's predicated on the idea that we're creating walking cities, and Townscape is developed on an older walking city morphology with face-to-face contact and pedestrian time and motion. So it's very relevant to creating walkable places, which is super important these days if we're trying to reduce the need for people to use fossil fuels and get people out of cars. Use Townscape to create large-scale structural interest that's embodied in the street and the block structure as a foundation for creating place. So remember, once those streets go in, that's it. Once those building lines go in, that's it. They're there a long time. You've got to get it right first time. Visual emphasis, we can't divorce it from context, uses, construction materials, techniques and local values. So we have to use Townscape alongside other urban design tools such as the responsive environments approach to laying places out, to Kevin Lynch's ideas of imageability, to biophilic design, to actually make sure we're producing a full place. In terms of how we use it to communicate our design ideas, make sure you're using annotated plans, make sure you're using annotated models and sketches to provide evidence that you've used a Townscape approach as part of your placemaking strategy. Above all, when you're doing this, be subtle. It's not about creating great contrasts, it's about delivering a kind of gentle variation within a theme to create places that are highly textured and visually interesting. I hope you've enjoyed that and got something useful from it. Thanks very much for listening. Speak again soon.